And good morning. It is 7:08 and 7:08 a.m. here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. 58 degrees. And good morning, Sheriff Rowe.
Hey, good morning, guys. Good to be with you. Good to be with you.
And glad you're here. Been looking forward to this. How are things out at your hotel going? Is it? Are you full?
Well, we're not close to occupancy yet. We're still keeping the light on for those who need to spend the night there. But it's something we watch constantly.
Yeah, you've always got a room available, don't you?
We do. We will always keep the lights on.
Okay, keep the light on for you. Okay. Very good. Well, there's so much stuff to talk about,
Sure.
and of course, first thing what's on most people's mind is what's going on down in Houston, and I understand that you've already sent some of your troops down there to help.
Right.
Tell us about it.
Well, exactly. We're part of the state's combined communications group. We've got equipment here in Lubbock, primarily our mobile command vehicle, and we've got a tower unit, a portable tower unit that can be deployed anywhere that there's a loss of regular radio communication capability. And between the two units, they can be connected up. So where you've got the devastation of a hurricane that's going to take out aerial towers and those types of things. Typically, these things can get brought in, deployed, and then we can quickly be able to resume that capability of taking 911 calls as an example, and then getting first responders dispatched out to where they need to get to. And that's where it's a fascinating thing to watch. And then between the mobile command vehicle, it's got radio capability to talk to everything from ground units to aviation and marine units. And, of course, and unfortunately, we need a lot of marine capability right now.
Oh, no kidding.
With the flooding. So
could probably use 1,000 flat-bottom boats.
Absolutely. So, they headed out Sunday morning bright and early, staged in San Antonio, and have now been deployed to both Houston and Victoria. So we've got about 8 guys down there making sure all of it's working like it needs to.
I'm sure you've talked to them.
Oh, absolutely. So
are they working hard, staying busy?
Absolutely. There's no shortage of work down there, and of course it's spectacular to watch the coordination efforts happen. When you've got so many assets pouring in, and to get those things placed where they need them to get to and whatnot. We've got great folks, highly trained from not just us, but all over that are coming in there and hopefully helping to ease a lot of the headaches they've got down there while they're trying to deal with this mess.
There was a local story this morning about LPD sending some folks down there, and they were staging them in Katy.
Right.
And LPD was officers were going to provide security at the
shelters.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that same call late that night, just more of a kind of a warning that they may be calling for additional, depending on how the next few days go. So we'll see. We may still be sending some additional people down there to assist with that portion as well. But that's one thing, because you start getting into and you hear the stories. And we've deployed before. We deployed after Rita struck. We deployed after Ike hit. Down in there. And, a lot of times people don't, we're all seeing the short term, the first 72 hours, those types of things. These things are going to go on for several weeks before normal operations can resume. So.
We're sitting here right now looking at radar down in Houston, and it looks to me like they're getting hammered right now.
Oh, absolutely. And they don't need any more moisture, that's for sure.
Good grief, they certainly don't. The governor has made it clear that he's not going to put up with any looting.
Right.
And it just seems to me like that there is always looters in situations like this. What can you do of course, now they've deployed the entire Texas National Guard, but the National Guard, if I'm right about this, they don't police.
No, but they can.
They're
certainly,
not trained to it.
They can certainly act as deterrents, and that's where you're going to see a lot of it. So that if you've got and law enforcement as well, but where you've got accessible locations, so where you've got storefronts, those types of things are accessible. They will be moving to get units of some sort, whether it's National Guard, whether it's available law enforcement, to get in there and act as that deterrent to keep that from happening. Because again, everything is slowed. So then the necessity to have to make arrests and have to get people, down to jails and locked up secure, until those things can happen is also just further complicated by the situation as a whole.
Well, apparently they've had to evacuate multiple jails and prisons as well. How exactly do they? Where do they move them to? How do they?
Well, especially for down
that?
there, and that's one thing about the complexity of emergency management planning. And, it's stuff that sometimes we'll think kind of wears us out because we're constantly doing it, and we're doing what we call continuity of operations planning and those types of things to keep government functions running. So I would, certainly down there where you're in an area that's subject to, a massive storm like this, they have plans in place already to move, those prisoners north, and they've got probably contracts already in place that, and we do it up here. We've got these same types of arrangements with jurisdictions. If you had a tornado blow through, which would be something we would be more susceptible to, that we, as an example, since we're a larger facility, would say, bring them to us. We'll hold them until you can make other arrangements, or until you can resume your normal operations. So the same thing's happening down there. There's none of this stuff that I believe is a surprise to them. So if they get to the point that the decision is to evacuate a correctional facility, they're going to have a line of empty, of locations with empty beds available to move those to.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it is a mess, and like you say, I think it's going to go on for a while. And glad that Lubbock is able to provide some law enforcement to help them out down there. Obviously, it's that's one of the things that's most needed. We originally, when we talked a week or so ago to get you back on the show, was let's see, we want to take a break. Are we
let's
close?
go ahead. Let's go ahead and take it, and then we'll get into the
and we'll come back and talk about
crime statistics.
crime in Lubbock. How about?
Okay. We'll do that.
We'll be back in just a moment. News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM. We are KFYO. Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. 7:20 AM as we're moving along at 58 degrees. Talking to Lubbock County Sheriff Kelly Rowe this morning. And when we originally talked to you last week about coming out, we wanted to talk about some crime statistics. As I was saying, it seems like, of course, Matt and I come in every morning and go through all the local news, and so probably are much more attuned to this than perhaps some other people who only catch the news occasionally. But it just seemed like that there was very few days that would go by that we didn't see something about a shooting in Lubbock. And, of course, last week we had 4 shot in one day. What's going on, Sheriff?
Well, unfortunately, and you guys have heard me talk about it. I've been here on your show visiting about it, and in front of a lot of news cameras. But we have just got such an incredible narcotics problem going on, and with these just voluminous amounts. I mean, historically unprecedented amounts of stuff coming in. We've got a significant number of gang members out there representing 56 different gangs the last time I looked at a report. And unfortunately, what comes with all that is a degree of violence, and whether it's competition, whether it's it's some of the older things about stay off my turf, and those. But a lot of it just simply comes back to narcotics, and somebody owes somebody money, somebody stole somebody's product, price wars, supply and demand. And we've been watching it very, very closely, and we've been doing a lot of things to try to address it and tamp it down. But you put some focus on one particular type of gang or whatever the case might be, then you're going to have other ones. Knowing where we've got an emphasis going over here, and so they'll blow up over on the other side of it.
So are we seeing just the same old generic drugs that we always have, or is it meth?
Yeah, crystal meth is the primary. That's the biggest one. I looked at some of our numbers because we do so much of that stuff combined. For me, unfortunately, to talk about, crime statistics, my numbers would be kind of skewed because I've got everything outside the city limits. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of where you're seeing a lot of the news stories and things of that nature is happening inside the city. And
it's LPD's problem more than yours. Huh?
Well, I don't like to say it like that by any stretch, because when it comes to this part of it, these guys are all working together. Everybody, whether it's Sheriff's Office, LPD, state, Department of Public Safety, and even, Drug Enforcement Agency, Homeland Security, and several others that are all working, concerted and combined effort to address these things. But what we do see is, one particular statistic I took note of for our part is that over the last year we've seen almost a 50% increase, about 46% in aggravated assaults. And although we can't really drill down and tell you that every one of those is specifically related to this type of stuff, that's still a significant number in and of itself. When you look at your question about the crystal meth, but look at cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana, cocaine and ecstasy each are up 100%, in terms of what we've seized over the last year, and we're at almost 250% increase on marijuana. So again, there's no shortage of it making its way in here.
So have you seen a lot of marijuana coming in from Colorado?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. And then all the sidebar stuff that's now come with it. So I was telling a story here not too long ago. One of our night shift patrol officers intercepting a vehicle coming in down the Clovis Highway. And the suspect in the case had just bags and bags of groceries lining the back seat. And so the officer does a little further follow-up, gets to visiting with the driver, ultimately ends up getting a consent to search, looks in the trunk, and you've got even more bags of groceries, as I'm doing my finger quotation marks there. And upon closer inspection, immediately discover it's not an ounce of marijuana in the plant form, but every product imaginable that has THC in it, I think it was a she, but regardless, she was carrying in there enough to have a felony amount of THC.
All from
content.
Colorado.
Right, and it's all food products, I think it was their skin
brownies,
care, everything. Yeah, you name it. They seem to find a way to use marijuana as an ingredient in it. So, so from Colorado, we absolutely do see a lot of it, and in the quantities we're seeing is well beyond what they can legally even sell up there. So when you start talking, 100 pounds, 250 pounds, loaded up, that still tells you how much illegal business is happening up there on top of what's considered legal by their state law.
So they're putting a state of emergency on the opium problem. Have we seen a lot of uptick here as far as that's concerned?
Not as much as the east of us has. It's at epidemic proportions between heroin, between particularly the prescription drugs, your OxyContins and those types of things. It is really bad there. Now we've seen, I would say, consistent heroin, but not, it's been a couple of years since we've seen, an earth-shattering amount of that. And, of course, heroin kind of skews a lot of things because you see much larger weights when you're talking about cocaine, meth. I mean, that's stuff that's by the pound, by the kilo. And that heroin's a much, is so much more potent that, you're not going to, even though you might have what's considered a very big seizure of it, it may not be just a whole lot of it.
So, I assume then that drugs is the number one. In other words, I suppose you guys spend more time dealing with drug issues than you do any other single topic?
I think so. Obviously, all of us have our standard first responder, responsibilities and in sense of answering, regular calls, whether that's domestic violence. None of those are showing signs of slowing down either. But in terms of the comprehensive issues that come with the narcotics trade, where you've got all these secondary things that are popping up, from the home invasions to the aggravated assaults, the kidnappings, torture cases, those types of things that are happening as a result of it. Everything kind of boils back to that central point.
So in the aggravated assaults, we're up almost 50% over a year ago. What about some of the other categories quickly?
Well, again, some of the benchmarks that we look at a lot of times, when we're coming around that side, burglaries is an example, which is one we trace because, again, burglaries is a fundamental part of this because people are stealing people's things to sell to pay for their habit. Some of that we've seen some seemingly slight declines on as far as the county is concerned, but a lot of that may be due to enhanced patrol efforts and some of the things we're doing there. But for the most part,
do you
most
think
things
that
are up.
Concealed carry has helped or hurt in the area?
It's certain. You would like to think it's in the back of people's minds.
That's what I'm thinking. There's people who are going to burglarize a home. They're taking nowadays, and particularly walking into a 7-Eleven store now, if there's somebody there, you're taking a big chance of a concealed carry person shooting you.
Well, but one thing I've always said too, and I no doubt in my mind that somebody that's somewhat in their right mind is going to think think twice in that direction.
Yeah.
But if you've got somebody that is craving that next fix,
Doesn't matter.
Sometimes they're not thinking in those terms. They're not thinking about the possibility of going to jail or anything. All they're thinking about is how do I score some money and score a hit.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're right. Well, let's hold you over for this next break because we still have some things that I want to discuss. So we'll take this break here at 7:30, and be right back and finish off our conversation with Sheriff Kelly Rowe this morning. News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM. We are KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. It is 7:36 a.m. and 58 degrees, and we're talking with Lubbock County Sheriff Kelly Rowe. Really appreciate you taking the time to come out, Sheriff. Very quickly, we have 5 or 6 minutes here, and there's some questions I want to run by you real quick. Trump is opening it up and sending military
surplus equipment
to the cities. Is it a good idea, bad idea?
I think it's a good idea overall. There is a lot of benefit to be had from some of that. Can save a lot of jurisdictions a lot of money. I mean, obviously you got to look at what's available, what's coming. Some things, if the jurisdiction's not very careful, can cost them a lot more just trying to keep it up, and repaired and operable. But
now he's talking about sending in some heavy firepower too. I don't know exactly what that would be.
Off and on over the years, and I used to manage, that program back probably over a decade ago, and you'll see certain things come out. You might see where they come across a warehouse and find several cases of brand new 1911 pistols, still sitting in the Cosmoline as an example. Now demand for those is going to be quite high, but that's not an uncommon weapon to see as a duty pistol for law enforcement. Everybody's got to be cautious because that stuff is constantly tracked. It can never be auctioned or anything along those lines. So it's something that the jurisdiction needs to be very, very aware of.
Anything you got your eye on?
Oh no, we're not. We haven't looked at those surplus programs in a number of years.
Well, someone was talking yesterday about the city. The cities don't need that stuff. Well, and tell me if I'm wrong, but if I'm a policeman and you've got some guy in a house who's shooting at you, I would want some big heavy armament and a whole bunch of SWAT guys.
Exactly.
You go in with overwhelming force, which hopefully the guy says, well, I can't shoot my way out of this. I need to surrender. Well, isn't that basically the whole idea of the overwhelming force?
Well, absolutely. And when you look at like the case down in Odessa here, or Ector County, a couple of years ago, you had a trained Vietnam veteran who had trenched his yard out to the point that before that was over with, they thought there was multiple people shooting. But it was just him capable of, and with enough military training to move from firing point to firing point to firing point with a grade of weapon that could reach out and touch you, easily at 300 meters or better.
Jeez.
So again, and Ector County lost, and Odessa lost some officers out of that situation, making the standard approach to the house. So once that does turn into a SWAT type of thing, yes, you've got to have capability to keep the officers safe until they can resolve the problem.
And another thing I did want to mention. It seems like that we as law enforcement here in Lubbock are getting better about not shooting as many people.
Well, I don't know.
I
understand. No, tactics have changed, and
it's like this incident that occurred here just a few weeks ago, where a person was holding someone hostage in a house. SWAT moved up, contained the house. They sent the dog in after the guy, and I'm guessing that maybe stitching up some dog bites is a whole lot better than getting a bullet through the head.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, the citizens and the officer safety is paramount to us, and so again, you've seen some great evolutions over the years of how we approach things. Barricaded subject with a hostage, you're going to negotiate for quite a while, and then you're going to start making a determination on whether or not there's a need to make entry. And at that point, officers, everybody's at risk the moment, flashbangs start going off and they're making dynamic entries. So you're seeing us move away from some of those as much as we possibly can.
So as far as the new jail, what kind of occupancy rate do you have right now?
We're probably 65-70%, I think. I hadn't actually broken into a percentage. I think yesterday we were sitting at about 1,150 out of 1,512 bed total.
And then I did have one other question. As far as the sheriff's department working with other counties. Have y'all done a lot of that recently? Because I know that y'all work with more than just Lubbock County in this area.
Oh, absolutely. That's the one thing with being Lubbock and the hub city is that we provide not only through the Council of Governments and that mutual aid responsibility to all our surrounding counties in this area, because typically most of them are very small, very limited on resources, and if they have a situation arise, even to the case of one of the most recent things, going back to the jail a little bit, was receiving an inmate that they just could not handle. And when you've only got maybe one jailer on at night and you've got a problem inmate in there, well, we've got that capability to be able to take and handle them until they're through the process. But whether it's a law enforcement related matter, civil disobedience, whatever the case might be, we're in a position we'll go support them.
Well, that pretty much covers things, but it seems to me that LPD and Lubbock County Sheriff Office, the Sheriff's Department, doing a very good job, just according to what we see. You don't see them shooting up too many people, and it seems like. Another thing, it seems like that the rate of cases that you guys close is just incredible. This is very seldom that somebody's on the loose for more than a couple of days.
Exactly, and in this day and age,
is it technology?
Technology plays a big part in it. Investigative techniques have changed quite a bit, and then you just, like I said, you've got just the natural instincts of officers that know how to go out and find people.
Yeah, and just a reiteration. We talked about it some during the break as well. A lot of these crimes they don't happen to normal everyday people. They're happening to people that are having drug problems. So, all this news that you see shouldn't cause panic if you're not in that lifestyle.
Absolutely. I can't emphasize that point enough. It's one thing to tell you this stuff is not isolated, maybe to north and northeast Lubbock by any stretch, but the other half of it is that all of the area law enforcement are doing a great job of keeping that stuff tamped down as much as possible. But a lot of what you're seeing there, like I said, is not random acts of violence. These are individuals that know each other. They're in the business, something's gone sideways, and just the typical behaviors we've seen in gangs since Los Angeles in the 60s. Mm-hmm. It's that same type of stuff, so you're going to have the violence that comes with it.
Okay, Sheriff, that's going to wrap it up. That's our time. We appreciate so much you coming out and being on our
My pleasure
our
as
program.
always.
Always good information. We'll take a break and be right back with more.